And we're live. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, hi everybody. We're with Matt today on my second UX live session, and we're gonna work on the loading flow of the checkout of the overall checkout flow of his app. His app is called fbar.app, right?
Fbars.app.
Nice. And the whole idea is that it's just a web app where you connect your bank accounts and you can download a report with the highest amount of your balance of the balance of your bank accounts throughout the year. So it's a pretty simple app. You just connect your bank accounts and you download the report with a specific amount in it. As I said before, we're gonna work on the UX of the loading flow, and I think the best way to start with is to talk about the basics around the UX of loading and how we should think about it, what the main principles and the main rules we should keep in mind. So let's start with that and see where it goes. So the most basic principle, it's something that I've discussed with Matt as well in the past a lot. It's the most basic principle, not only for loading, but for UX in general, is that we're humans and we're hardwired from the mother nature to interact with humans, not machines. Machines is actually something that we created. It's not something that existed there. Well-designed machines are the ones that think and act like humans, the ones that work as expected. And this is what we call intuitive design. It's just when it feels right. It just works as it should. The bad design machines are the ones that don't fit our way of thinking, the ones that are complex and hard to use. Complex actually means that we have to think a lot, which means that it's not designed to work the way that our brain works. And this is what we call bad design. So what's the best way to build the loading flow of my app? The answer is just think and build like a human. And the way to actually do it is by observing the offline world. That's always the analogy that I use. And that's the mental model that I use a lot as a designer. I'm just trying to think, okay, if this was not a user flow in an interactive software product, how would it be in the offline world? So in our case, as we said, FBAR is an app that generates a report with the highest amount of your balance throughout the year. It's very simple as an app. If FBAR was in the offline world, it would be actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, a human-to-human interaction between the user and the bank store employee, right?
Yeah. It would be some person-to-person contact.
Exactly. Perfect. So let's try to visualize it. I think that's a great way to begin with. Let's try, the two of us, now to think about, okay, how would it actually be in the bank store to get this report? Your goal as a user is to learn what's the highest amount of your balance throughout the year, throughout 2020, let's say. So if I'm the user, and you're the bank store employee, I'm just gonna get in the bank store. I'm gonna just get into the store, and we'll start talking to you, and I will describe what I want. So I will tell you, hey, I'm looking for this. I'm looking to find out what's the highest amount of my balance throughout 2020. How could you help me? And then you're gonna reply, what's the process? And let's say that there is not really a process. I just have to tell you the bank account. Actually, the process, I just have to tell you which bank account I want, because I have 10 bank accounts in the bank that you are working at. I tell you the bank account, you reply back to me that, hey, Jim, okay, cool. I'm gonna take a look now and see what I can get. And if it takes time, what would you do? Let's say you start looking for this amount, and in 5 seconds from now, you cannot find the amount. What would you do? Would you just keep searching without telling anything, or would you inform me?
Yeah, I would come back to you and say, hey, you gave me an account to look up, or you're looking for details on this account, and I'm not able to find that account. Did you give me the right account? At that point, it's like trying to work with the user of, okay, well, you gave me a number that you believed to be right. There must be something to what you've given me.
Okay, perfect. So you would actually give me some kind of status update, right? You would inform me that, hey, either you gave me the wrong bank account or it's just a time-consuming process and I need 5 more minutes to do that. You would let me know what's actually the progress. That's how human interactions work. It's action and reaction. I tell you something, you tell me something back. And when we have to do something together and work together, it's this way of interaction again. And that's how actually systems should work as well. The good systems are the ones that provide clear feedback when you interact with them. So in our case, for the loading, I skipped this part. As I said, what would a human do is provide constant status updates. An example of intuitive design and constant feedback in the software world is the progress bar of Safari, for example.
Yeah.
It's super clear. You see that a file is getting downloaded and you see the exact process. So you have constant feedback updates. You see how many megabytes have downloaded and how much time it's going to take as well, the remaining amount of time. And you also have clear options, the actions of what you can do. You can either cancel or open the file once it's downloaded. So the key point here is constant status updates. That's the only thing we should keep in mind. Now I'm going to talk a bit about the theory and the psychology of users and all the stuff that we should have in mind in general so that we can understand why some things should be the way they are.
Yeah.
First is the concept of actual time and perceived time. Actual time is if I start a timer, like I hit the URL, I start a timer, and then I start counting how many seconds it's going to take to load a web page. This is the actual time. The perceived time is how much time the user feels that it took. So it's not an amount, it's just a feeling. The feelings are not really measurable with a specific value. As developers, we're super used to the actual time. So we may make an improvement of, let's say, 0.5 seconds of the loading time, and we're super excited that, I optimized the code and now it's faster and so on, but the user cannot really perceive the 0.5 seconds difference. So it's like we changed nothing in terms of UX. Of course, it's good that we improved our system, but on a UX level, nothing really changed. So it's always good to keep in mind that what humans perceive as time is not always aligned with the actual amount. Of course, if the actual time is a big amount of time, like 20 seconds, people will perceive in the same way. It's not that it's always different. So as I said, perceived time or performance, let's say in this case, is a measure of how quick a user thinks your app is. And that's more important than its true performance, because in our case, we care about UX. Here it's good to mention the 4 response time limits. And there are 4 main time limits we should keep in mind in general. The 0.5 to 0.2 seconds is perceived as instant response. So whatever happens within this time limit is perceived as instant. Let's say you click a button, for example.
Yeah.
Then the 0.5 to 1 second is perceived as immediate behavior. And this is the amount of time that usually takes for humans to respond. So it's something that we perceive as, okay, that I tell you something, you take some time to think, and then you reply back. That's why, for example, when we have big gaps of silence, it always feels a bit weird. And for me, for example, the live streaming session, I struggle with not making any noise when I'm thinking. Right. Which is very hard, but we're used to responding quicker. So when we want time to think, we try to fill in the gap with weird sounds in order to stay within this time limit, let's say.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Interesting.
Then the 2 to 5 seconds is perceived as the optimal experience. Like 2 seconds used to be as a metric from the research that I did that is like the best, used to be like the best kind of limit to have for loading a website in general. And then 5 to 10 seconds is actually, 10 seconds is the maximum. And I think that the new one is just 5, not 10 seconds, because as years went through, this amount got reduced, is the maximum time of users' attention span. So after 5 to 10 seconds, people are gonna switch focus. They won't be able to focus on your web page anymore.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, I'm not sure what the difference between the third and fourth bullet are. When we say it's an optimal experience, is that like you should never like, is it the idea that after 5 seconds that their attention just falls off completely? So users are willing to wait between 2 and 5? Is that the idea?
Yeah, within 2 and 5 seconds, it's okay. Like if you stay silent for 5 seconds and I wait, it's perceived as okay.
Okay.
For more than 5 seconds, I will start looking somewhere else. So it's
Okay,
really how much time you just wait there and look, let's say, at the wall, or just waiting for somebody to reply.
This is gold, because this is exactly the reason I wanted to talk to you about this.
Nice.
Realizing that the test data I was using was loading very quickly, and then I flipped it over to the real world, and all of a sudden I was waiting 6, 7 seconds, and you're just watching a spinner for 7 seconds, and you're like, yeah, it's funny. It really is true. You hit that 5-second barrier, and you're like, is it broken? Like I know there's a spinner, but like, you open up the inspect console and it's like, is there errors I'm not seeing?
Exactly. And it's really nice to know the theory behind it, to understand, because all these are, I have also a link in the presentation from where I found all these amounts, is based on research that has been done from big institutions. And it's super interesting to really know the theory behind it, understand, okay, what's the right number, let's say, to have a loading state static.
Very cool.
So here, the next thing to mention is the concept of active and passive user brain mode. Active mode is when our brain is busy, and yeah, I made a typo, and we don't realize we're waiting at all. So now that I'm talking to you, I'm busy with talking, so I don't wait for anything. When you're busy, you don't wait. That's the rule. That's the active mode. The passive mode is when you actually wait. So your brain is not occupied with anything, it's not busy with anything, and you start to get bored, usually. Your goal as a product maker is to keep, when you build a waiting flow, is to keep users in the active mode as much as you can, so that they won't get bored. That's the golden rule of waiting flows. It's super simple. Just keep them in the active mode. How you do that? You can do it in 2 ways. Of course, you cannot always have the active mode, because, for example, progress bars are not always done, right? We don't always know when we make API requests the exact amount of time that it's going to take, and we don't have constant updates on how much data we have transferred through the API and how much are remaining. So in the real life, you have to do 2 things. The one is to keep passive mode within the safe limits. So the 2-second thing that we said, it was 2 to 5, I think. Yeah, 2 to 5 seconds. And then use the active mode as much as you can. So really think, how can I use the active mode more? I have some examples to take some inspiration. The first is, which is the most like a typical example, is the loading state. When we load a blog post, you can either load text, you can render text from top to bottom as you get the HTML from the server, or you can just have a spinner, and when the full page is loaded, show it immediately. So showing it in a progressive way, where you load the content step by step, is way better, because you keep the user busy. They have to process the new things that show up in the screen. On the other hand, you look at a spinner, and if you ask a user which website do you think is faster, they're going to tell you the right one, even if it's the exact same amount of time. That's a good example of perceived and actual time.
Okay.
Here is with actually UI status updates. This is an Instagram post. First, you have the screen in iOS where you have the post settings. You tap on the search button, and then you can see here that it's the model closes, and then you see this new item popping in, sending. You see a progress bar. So if you're busy looking at the progress bar, you see that something's going on there. The progress bar will stay within the safe limits, probably. That would be the right thing to do. And then this gets transformed to a post, and the post has an image in it, but the app hasn't fetched the image yet. And what they do is, instead of having a boring loader, they blur the emotes, so you know that something will show up there. You keep you make the UI more interesting this way instead of having a white layer with a spinner. And then as the image gets loaded, you start seeing a better version of it. I don't remember how it's called. Maybe you remember. Is it the WebP format or something? There is an image format on web that can have this kind of progressive loading and doesn't go from nothing to full render, but has intermediate steps.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this.
So that's a very good example of how you keep a user busy by actually changing things in the UI. That's the simple description. Another way is when you can do anything, just get creative. And indiehackers.com, which is a website that I use every day, and Slack as well, is what they do in the loading state is that they have some nice codes. And that's actually pretty fun because it's not, they don't really inform you of what's happening behind the scenes because probably there are too many things and for some reason it doesn't make sense to inform you. And what they do is that they have an abstract progress bar or spinner. In this case, it's a progress bar in the indie hacker, so you can get a sense, okay, how much do I have to wait? If you cannot tell the exact amount of time, just give them an estimation like this. With the progress bar, you see, okay, around 60% of the website has been loaded, so there's not much to wait for. So a progress bar combined with a nice loading state is always better. Imagine indie hackers having just the loading and 3 dots as state. Now it's way more interesting because every time it shows a different code. And the cool thing is, if you read the text that has in here, it's gonna take around half of the loading time of indiehackers.com. So you don't, that's the thing, you don't realize that it's gonna take so much time to actually load because you stay busy reading something. So even showing interesting content while loading, that could be a thing.
Yeah, I feel like that fits with the parable of the slow elevators. Have you heard that engineering thing before?
I know, but it's interesting. Go for that.
Yeah, so the parable goes, there was a skyscraper that had one bank of elevators, and people were complaining that the elevators were way too slow. So this engineering company came in, and they were contracted to come in and speed the elevators up. So their solution was not to make the elevators any faster, but to put mirrors on the front of all of the elevators. So that way you would hit a button and you had nothing to do, but there was a mirror, so you could look at yourself now. So people were entertained while they were waiting for the elevators to reach them. So it was just giving the user something to worry about, giving them something to think about while they're waiting for this slow thing to occur.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. Yeah, that's a great example of how you can apply this in the offline world. Another thing, it was when I was reading about growth hacking in the past, I remember this very cool example. It was in an airport. I don't remember which one. I don't know if it was in the Netherlands or somewhere else. And there was a problem to solve. The problem was that people complained that they were waiting too much for their luggages to arrive on the luggage area. And what somebody would suggest is, okay, let's optimize the process and bring the luggage faster to the travelers. And what they did as a growth hack, it's a smart kind of UX optimization, is that they made the distance to get to the luggage area bigger so that people will be busy getting there, but it will take them the same amount of time. So that's why it's a growth hack. Like we could say it's a UX hack, but it's still the same thing. Keep them busy with something and they won't realize that they have to wait.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's super clear of what's the idea. Keep them busy in a good way.
Makes sense.
And yeah, that's pretty much it for the presentation. I think we could jump into Framer and start playing around and design something.
Do it.
Nice. You told me that you have a prototype.
Yep.
To discuss. Okay.
Yep.
Do you want to share?
Sure.
Share your screen.
Let's do it. I do not have permission to do so. It says it's disabled.
Give me 1 sec.
Yeah, no problem.
If I stop sharing, can you share your screen now?
No, it says you've disabled attendee screen sharing.
That's typical Zoom Unix. Let's try. I don't see the option now, but now does it work? Allow to record?
Well, allow to record. No, it still says disabled. If you want to share your screen and go into Framer, I have it laid out.
That would be perfect. Because I have no clue how to give you permission now. Once. Okay, you can see my screen, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the bottommost flow.
I see your cursor.
Yeah.
What now? And the starting screen is the flow slash.
Yeah, you can start there. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's loading. 1 sec.
Yeah. It's bad UX. It's not showing me how much is left. Okay, here, perfect. Okay, yeah. So so if you just click to add an account in the normal way, we'll just kind of walk through and add your first bank account.
Yeah, let me see if I can make the photo bigger. Nice.
No, that's fine.
It's clear enough on the screen, right?
Yeah, I can read everything.
Okay, perfect. So create new 2019 report. Add the bank accounts you want to include in your report. Add a bank account. Okay, continue. Select your bank. Okay, create new report, generate report.
Yep.
Yeah, let's say I added everything.
Okay, so this is where I'm at. So now the idea is when I ran some tests in dev, I realized that it's going to take some time for me to fetch everything, especially depending on how many accounts and how many banks you provide. So the first thing I did was, well, I know that I want to gray out your ability to download your results. So I kind of downplayed them, but then I added a spinner here. And the idea is a couple of different things can go wrong when you're, wrong. Like it can take time to fetch data, but there can also be connectivity problems with banks. So what I did was I kind of copied like a status page from any tech product. So if you click on, so right now I'm hoping that the spinner makes it clear that, okay, this report is happening or something is going on, and then you can view the progress of the report. And even now from our talks, it feels like the maybe I should be taking you right to the progress page rather than dropping you on this page, because it's like, oh, there's stuff to read and there's things going on and there's a spinner. Might be more informative for the user. So if you click on view progress, for example, so in this case, I'm just trying to show like, hey, oh, there's an alert, there's something here, there's a problem, and then using that as a way of keying off to have the user say, oh, like something's going on. So in this case, I was going to say, my idea was, I either want them to wait out, I want to give them the option to wait, but I also want to say, hey, there's a problem with one of these banks, I'll send you an email later. So maybe the answer to this is, rather than saying, wait on this page for this thing to happen, pop something up that says, hey, actually, normally this is done within a couple seconds, but there's connectivity problems with one of your banks. We'll send you an email when everything is ready. That might be a better.
Okay. I think one key word to use here is states. You can have multiple states and multiple scenarios. So it may simple on a design level that, yeah, it's nothing complex to design, it's just a loading state, right? That's always the thing that a trap that designers fall into, that they think, yeah, they're just gonna click the button and just go so I'm just going to show a spinner and then magically their report will show up. But the truth is that, yeah, it's not the case. There are, I don't know, like 10 scenarios that can actually happen. You can have connectivity issues, API errors probably that you have to handle, slow internet connections, so it takes more time, and so on. Back in Ticket Shop, where I used to work, I remember on the checkout flow, it was a painful flow to work on, especially when it comes to loading, because some banks would take a lot of time for them to complete the payment request. So we had to come up with different scenarios and different states for each scenario. So I would say the right thing to do is to design each scenario specifically on its own, to design each scenario on its own, actually, and treat it as a unique flow instead of just one flow that everything fits into.
Okay.
That's always a thing. Yeah, that's something good to mention. When it comes to loading and error handling, I've seen that developers in general, and me as well, because yeah, I'm a developer as well. We want to have a nice modular solution. We build one loading component and then we can reuse it everywhere, which totally makes sense because you keep your code clean, you keep it reusable, you keep things simple. However, on UX level, every error is not the same. It really depends. And the whole thing, for example, with error states, it's not about only showing a message. Okay, I design a component that shows a red text, and this red text will come from the API. But this is not enough. This text will probably describe what happened, but what should I do as a user? How this error, what should be the next steps of this error? That's why I tend to see every error state and every loading state as a unique user flow as well, because if there are connectivity issues, you have to follow a different path as a user to get the report, compared to the case that you just have slow internet. There are two different scenarios. So I would say let's write the scenarios down and start designing for them. What do you say?
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna start taking some notes. Let me take. It feels a bit slow framework today. Maybe it's.
I mean, it could be this design because I have so many. I have so much stuff in it.
Let me take.
We can probably I can probably remove a bunch of my old designs because they don't.
Actually, let me give it a try. What we could do is we can copy what we can just move the frames that are about this prototype to a new page. If you look at my screen, the loading states here, we just group them into pages.
Oh, yeah,
I think
that was true.
All these screens over here.
Yeah, that's all.
Okay, I'm just gonna remove them. Don't see anything in the frames, which is weird.
I mean, there's components in there. At least the components are listed properly on the left.
Yeah, probably there's some rendering issues. That's right.
Let me see if it's any faster on my end. Yeah, it looks okay on my end.
Mm-hmm. Looks like it works now.
That looks good.
Okay, yeah, something was wrong, but now looks like it's working properly. Nice. So let's write the scenarios. One thing to mention, I love your approach with the spinner. One thing that is really important, and I always like with the user flows is that as a user, I I spent time on your product to get this report. So I want you to show me this report as quick as possible. I don't want to wait and have a white screen that says completing the payment and have to wait there for 10 seconds. If you even just show the spinner for like 1 minute, it's even better than showing the same loading state in just the spinner in a widescreen, because here I see that, okay, I can see the report. It's just a matter of time to see this button becoming clickable. It's so much different on a UX and psychology level. Here the report exists. I can see it. It's listed in my reports list. If it was just a widescreen, there is no report. I'm just stuck on a annoying waiting screen. So I find this great on a UX level. Well done, man.
Thank you. That's a very astute observation. It's like you mentioned it before, the idea of a payoff. It's like I want to do something and I want to get a payoff immediately. And I guess I must have assimilated that information when I was building this page.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if the analogy with a physical store would make sense in this case, but imagine being in a physical store and paying for the product, and once you complete the payment, you can see the product. Let's say it's a pair of shoes. You're in a sneakers store. But if you have the product like in front of you and you just wait for the payment, it's so different because you have the product there. You feel closer to it. It's not the best analogy for this case, but it does the job to an extent, let's say. The whole idea is that if it's a widescreen, I cannot see any report. It doesn't exist. If it's listed in there and just has an action disabled, the report is there. It exists. It means that I did the right thing because now I have the report. I just need to wait for something to be completed in order to be able to download it.
Totally.
And this one, I'm not gonna go deep into this topic, but could be another session. It's called optimistic UI. It's you're building the product in an optimistic way because you believe that everything will go right and the action will just get enabled. I can show you an example because since this came into discussion, this topic, let's give it a quick look. There are many articles around that. I think on UX Planet, it was my favorite one. What you did is similar to how WhatsApp works, or Messages, or all messaging apps. What they do is this. You click send, you see the message, and then you see the loading. It's we're discussing about these two cases. This one is optimistic because the UI is designed in a way that believes that this message will be sent. And if it doesn't, you just saw an error there. But here it's like, I have no clue if it's going to be sent. Let's just block everything and wait. And if it's sent, then I'm going to show it to you. Right. The optimistic UI is a really nice terminology. You can say that this is also asynchronous loading in a way that you don't have to block the user. Don't block them from anything. Just do what you should do and show the loading states. Only on the parts that are needed.
That gives me tons of ideas. Now, because I'm thinking for that, well, I guess we'll come to it when we write out some of these states, but like already I can see, because I have the ability to know beforehand, oh, you bank with this bank and I'm having connectivity problems with the bank. The UI should reflect that. And maybe your where you land should be on this page where I tell you about the problems and how we can resolve them versus everything's fine. We're going to drop you on this page because the payoff is coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Nice, cool stuff. Very interesting conversation, man, as always.
These points, taking good notes today.
Nice. Let me check. What are the screens on the right?
So it's sorry, what was your question?
I see there are some frames on the right as well.
Oh yeah, it's that's like if you continue through the flow, because I wanted to show the in my prototype I wanted to show having multiple editions.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I see. So let's just move them to the right. Okay, so that we have plenty of space for our new screens. And these, let's move them over here. One quick feedback point about the view progress is that it's too complicated. I suddenly see a new page that I have to process the whole layout. understand where this page lives, if it's a model or if it's a new page. Observe, find out the navigation, to find the navigation controls, process what is inside the screen and how it relates to the previous screen. So it's just too many things to process for no specific reason. The progress should be shown in line actually, because I see the loading here, just show me the details where the loading happens. I don't have to see a new screen, like a new screen. Or you could have a tooltip, let's say, for desktop, if you really want to hide it. I think a popover or something like that would be the best element instead of a new page, because it's less distracting in terms of UX. Let's write down the scenarios. I'm just gonna write it as a text next to the screen. Scenarios. Okay. Do you have something in mind for the?
Yeah, so the base scenario is everything is fine. You added a bank, connectivity is good, and we're going to process your report.
Everything goes well.
Yeah.
Do you have any estimation of a range that it could take, let's say, from 5 seconds to 5 hours, or like 5 seconds to 10 seconds, to have a bit of a mean and minimum and the maximum value?
I've seen it take, I mean, if it took longer than 30 seconds, I'd be surprised, but 30 seconds as a max, I think is a fair place to start.
Okay, and the minimum you would say?
I've seen it done in like less than 5 seconds.
Okay, let's say 5 seconds to keep it safe. Nice. And then what are some other scenarios?
Another scenario could be we see degraded performance with one bank. So yeah, like we're having connectivity problems, or there's something wrong with the banking provider. In that case, it's questionable how long it could take. I mean, it could take hours for a bank to come back online for us to pull data.
You mean that, let's say, the API of the bank is down?
Exactly.
What is this an edge case, or is it something that happens pretty often?
It happens often enough that Plaid, the API provider, you can query institutions, and you can query an institution and say, what's the error rate? So I think it might depend on the bank. Like some banks are worse than others, but I don't know that it's necessarily an edge case. I haven't experienced it yet, but I'm not in production yet. So
yeah. Okay, so connectivity issues, API is down, for example, and have no clue how much time it will take. And then what are some other cases?
I mean, I guess it's possible that there could be some sort of internal error. Like I've broken something and something's going on. The problem's with me and not with the provider. But that would be, I should be able to test around that.
Okay.
I think that's really it. That's all I can think of, at least.
Okay, makes sense. So that's very interesting. Let's start with a no error scenario. Let's just take one scenario at a time and design for it.
Okay.
The no errors, how should we do it? Let's start designing just by describing it with text. No errors scenario. First, you show like a spinner. First, let's think of line first. Let's do the what we suggest in the presentation as well. If it was offline and you were the bank employee, I would ask you, can you provide me the report? You would reply, sure, which means I click the pay, the checkout button in your case to download the report. And then you start looking for it. So you can tell me that I am creating your report. So just please wait. So we can just write, I'm creating your report. Please wait. Please hold on. And then we have the time limitations that we discussed about in the presentation. If it's more than 5 seconds, every 5 seconds, you update me of what's going on. And that's pretty much it. And actually, if it takes a lot of time, we would say that is more than 10 seconds, not 10 seconds. Yeah, that was the time limit from the presentation, actually.
Yeah,
this is a maximum. If it takes a lot of time, which means if it takes more than 10 seconds, inform them that it shouldn't take more than 30 seconds, because that's the maximum that he told me. So if I'm waiting already for 10 seconds, we could say that, hey, sorry, something is going on here. Probably we have some connectivity speed issues, let's say. It should be done in the next minute. Usually it doesn't take more than 30 seconds. So you give them the estimation that, hey, it's getting some time here, but it's not going to be more than 30 seconds probably. So just please hold on. So this actually could be on a UI level. What we could do is to have these as nodes over here. So this is the other thing for the spinner. The spinner looks a bit weird, but never mind. And what we could have here is, give me 1 second.
Oh yeah, when it stretches, it does really interesting things to the spinner.
Yeah. So could just have a small sentence over here. Let me actually, duplicate the frame to not destroy your prototype. Okay. And we can drop the view progress because, yeah, I don't want to spend more time reading more stuff. You can just show here status update message. So you can have 3 different messages and just, yeah, just change them according to the time. So you just set a counter on the backend or front-end level, and when you hit the limit of 5 seconds, you say, at first you say, please hold on, we're creating your report, please hold on. After 5 seconds, you can say that, hey, we're still creating it, please wait some more time. And if you reach the 10 seconds limit, you can say that, hey, for some reason it's taking more time, please hold on, it shouldn't take for more than 30 seconds. And you could even keep it like this for the next, until it's done, or for the next 10 seconds, let's say. The rules, like the 5 second rule, is a guideline. That's another thing that I had a lot before I started working as a designer. As a developer, a rule is a rule. It's over.
Yep.
5 seconds is 5 seconds. There is like, I really have to apply to the rule 100%. There is no in between. So that's why this is a guideline. It's good to know that every 5 seconds is the maximum amount that people will keep waiting. So in our case, if the user, if it takes more than 10 seconds and people are bored and don't wait and change the tab, they won't close the product because they want the report, of course. They may just go to the next tab, let's say, then it's fine as well. They're gonna come back later.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have, the every should become after here. We don't have to change the message every 5 seconds. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind for me in the wording. Rule and guideline are two different things. Guideline is better to use, it's softer in terms of discipline that you have to keep. So the no error scenario is actually designed. That's it. We only need to write the copy, but we already discussed what the copy will be like. We have an indication of how it should be. Then let's go for the second scenario, which is the after 5 connectivity issues. So connectivity issues can happen from 1 to 5 seconds or any time in between, right? You don't know when it's going to happen, of course.
Exactly.
So what makes sense is to keep this as your baseline, these 3 status updates. And if something happens in between, you just let the users know. So for the first 5 seconds, you say, hey, hold on, we're creating your report. If 5 seconds pass, we say that we're still on it, please hold on. And if you reach 10 seconds, then you show the message with that informs the user that it's not going to take more than 30 seconds probably. You can keep this as the main functionality of the loading state. And let's say a connectivity issue happens. This is actually an error, right? Yeah. Something went wrong here. So how do we, in your phone device, how do you see errors most of the time?
Yeah, usually when there's an error of some kind, it's a modal, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's an alert, exactly.
Yeah, it's also an alert.
Or it can be in line if it's like the email validation. But the most common pattern, especially in mobile apps, one small note here is I use mobile apps, especially the default ones from Apple or Google or Android as well, are a great source of inspiration on what patterns to use for specific use cases, because people use their phones every day. So that's what they are used to. And in this case, an error happened, so it makes sense to throw a modal because you want to draw their attention that, hey, you want to keep them on the active mode, as we said before, that, hey, something happened here and you need to take an action probably. And that's the thing. Since it's an error, you need to take an action, right? It's not that you just need to know that, hey, we have some issues here, just hold on.
Well, that's the problem with this, that the user really, there's no more, like the problem at this point is like, quote unquote, on my end. Like I'm the one who's connecting to their bank. So if there's something wrong with the bank, there's nothing actually for the user to do. We have to wait for the connectivity issue to end. So there's nothing really for the user to do. It's more like you expected your, I guess what I'm trying to deal with is they're expecting their report right now and I just can't give it to them.
Okay, you described it in a great way. Let's think offline. What would happen in, let's say you got the bank account and for some reason the bank web platform that you use as an employee is down. What would happen? What would you tell me?
Yeah, so it would be something like, so I would tell you, hey, there's a problem with my system right now. I need you to, I don't know when it's going to be back up. You can wait around if you want. But when you want the answer, to get the answer, you're going to have to come back for it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's what we should do in this case as well. These are the only options. So the whole idea of loading state is to be transparent. It's not, people tend to think that the good UX is that UX is when the product works in the perfect way, like that doesn't have any error or something, but this is not doable. This is like an utopia, let's say. You cannot have a product without bugs, without API errors, without anything. So in this case, you just need to be transparent, and you just described what the UX should be. We can tell the user that, hey, you can either wait here for whatever amount of time, you can just wait here and see if it's gonna work, or you can just close the tab and we're gonna send you an email where you will have the link to download your report. And of course, we need to inform them why this happened, why they have to wait or leave the app, because it's not something positive, like it's not something that they want to do in any case. And being transparent that, hey, it's not our problem, but something happened on the bank, our connection with the bank. That should be enough. Actually, I cannot really think of any other solution. And the proper UX here is that you have the email functionality, because if you tell them, yeah, you have to wait, it's like them giving a fuck about it. Like, yeah, you have problems with the API. I don't want to keep this tab open for the next 5 hours or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So you design the user journey, right? This is not, you won't see on any best practices of loading states that you should build an email functionality if something goes wrong, let's say, or something like that. That's why I believe that every scenario should be designed as a unique user journey. So in this case, the scenario is that I don't know how much time it's going to take. So what we can do is show error messages. So alert, in this case, alerts are not always when you wanted to take an action, but when you want to make sure that they will read what happened. So you block everything. That's the whole point of showing an alert. They're intrusive. They block every user interaction, and they inform you on a specific thing. So you have a small box in the front of the screen saying this happened, and these are the options. And you can either say, okay, you just have a single button, which is super common in iOS, that is informative alert, or you have next steps. For the next steps, in the next scenario where something happened in the app, you can have a get help where you open a live chat and you talk to Matt immediately so that he can solve the bug as fast as he can, and you can get your report in this case.
Yeah.
So for this scenario, we should show an alert describing what happened and what should be the next, and what are the next steps for the user. These two things is everything you need to have good error states and design proper alerts. Describe me what happened, why it happened, and what should I do. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
So in this case, we can just show a model, an alert model, describing what happened. Just to save time for, yeah, go for it.
No, I was just going to say, I was just going to draw attention to it because I think it's so interesting because when I was looking for inspiration here, I pulled it from from a status page and I wanted to copy their design. But what's funny is that the status pages don't give you a next step. They're like, it's down, like you're seeing degraded performance, it's down. So like there is no next step. It's more like, I guess, I don't know, if you're a developer looking at the service, you're like, oh, it's down, I get it. So the next step is for me to wait. It's not, it's almost like it's inferred. Oh, you're inferring that the next step is to wait, rather than outright saying, well, the next step is your bank is going to fix something and then you get your report.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's really like the offline world. It's like having the bank employee saying, hey, you know what? The system is down. I cannot provide the report. I'm like, okay, what should I do here, man? Should I stay in the store and wait for you? Should I leave? Should I come back later? Should I give you my phone number? What do you want me to do? Yeah. So in the offline world, there is never the concept of not providing next steps, because it's gonna, I don't know, it just doesn't work this way in the offline world. Otherwise, it's going to be super weird that you just look at the other person without telling them anything. So that's, if you don't provide any next steps, it's really this thing is as if you were the employee and you would tell me something went wrong, and I would be like, okay, what should I do? And you would just uh, keep looking at me without saying anything. That's the whole. That's how it feels in the digital world. That's
Yeah.
I don't know what you should do.
Yeah, it's just the blank stare. Yeah,
exactly. And the thing is, that's why I use this analogy of the offline world. You cannot learn all the UX principles, all the UX best practice, all these UX whatever things that you should know in order to build the proper interface. These things that we're designing now, I didn't see it anywhere. I didn't read any book that said you should always throw an alert and describe this, and that. It's just, common sense. Of course, it's not like common sense. I trained my mind to think in this way, but it's always about finding a framework to use on the way that you think in order to come up with proper UX ideas. And the metaphor of think offline first is great. That's what Apple did with iPhone and innovated so much. For example, with the scrolling, it's always my favorite example. What they did is they said, okay, if I take, you can see the airports here. If I take my airports and do this, the acceleration is getting reduced. They stop because you have the friction. How do we call it? Friction. Yeah. In scrolling, before the iPhone gets published, like gets created, you would have touchscreens that had a pinch functionality. You had to really press them, and the scrolling, you would scroll and then you would get your finger out and it would stop immediately. And in nature, you don't have. It's like doing this, but the moment you leave it, it just stops. This doesn't work in nature. That's why it feels weird on the phone device, because I'm used to doing this and looking at the item to slow down step by step, slow down slowly. And that's what Apple did. They introduced the concept of friction and gravity. Actually, just friction in the scrolling list. And that's why it's so cool. And when you reach the end of the list, you have an elastic animation where you actually can pinch, but you cannot really, it's more of a pinch functionality, like an elastic animation. You cannot really keep the list and drag it wherever you want. And that's also in the physical world. It's like, this is the end of the list. I cannot get it more than that. That's the maximum. It's really how the physical world works. So offline is, if you want to do animation, think offline first. If you read about the best practices of animation design, it's always the main principles is how the physical world works. If I pinch my hand, let's say, you can see the skin getting in a way. So that's how it should work. Or if you jump, you bend your knees and then you push your body upwards. And that's what they do with the cartoons. They don't suddenly jump. Like, they first bend their knees and then they jump. So it's always about observing the offline world. I can never get bored of saying that. Because it's also a good reminder for me, man. It's like many times that I design, I fall in the trap. What would be the right thing? And I'm like, it's a very simple way to figure out. Think how it's in the offline world. So So in this case, connectivity issues, I think it's pretty clear for users. Of course, we can do user testing and see if the copy is clear enough to an everyday human. We could say we have connectivity issues with your bank at the moment. So this is what happened. And your next steps are, you can either wait for your report to be generated, or you can close your browser and we can just rephrase it and communicate in a simpler way. We don't know how much time Let me zoom in a bit. How much time it's going to take? How come it's going to take to generate your report? And we will send you an email with a link to download it once it's ready. Feel free to close your browser in the meantime. And that's it. Okay, and that's the alert. You don't need anything more than that. And then the last scenario is an internal error. For this one, I think we can do the exact same thing. So something went wrong. Something on the backend is broken, and we get some kind of error. So we can say literally something went wrong. Yeah, we can have something like, oops, something went wrong. We're really sorry for that. Usually this kind of copy empathizes with the user. It's a good thing that, hey, we know it's annoying, so we're sorry. Instead of like, something went wrong, we don't give a fuck. Like, you need to make the user feel that you know how they feel and that you express that. We're really sorry for that. So what's the next step actually? In the offline world, what would happen? This one is a bit hard because, yeah, an API error wouldn't really happen between the two humans, like, because, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it would be like if you gave me the job and I said no problem, and I turned around and like slipped and fell and hit my head.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that's a good metaphor analogy.
I fell, and you didn't know that I went to the back room and I fell. And there's this break between. There's no feedback. There's no available feedback. I guess it's a little different because we can always say on the back, like, it would almost be like you. I don't know. Like, you can.
In this case, let's say you have an injury and you cannot really do the report. So you fall down and your head starts bleeding. Whatever, you're gonna say, "Hey man, I'm sorry. Yeah, you can see that I just had a big fall here." So another employee could help you, or, "I'm sorry, but I cannot do anything. You should come again tomorrow." You still gonna provide me some next steps. So you provide what happened. Oops, something went wrong. We're really sorry for that. Then you can have here a more detailed error. I'm just adding a placeholder.
Yeah.
So you could have an error code, for example, that they could use for support. Of course, it's not the most human thing to say, hey, we had a 404 or 501, whatever status code error. But it's always good to provide some clarity, even if it's technical sometimes, unless if it's too technical that they can not understand. And then what you could say is actually get help. That's the only.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's the only action. Or try again, maybe, because that could solve the problem.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Well, you could maybe have a timeout, let's say. It's not that something literally broke, or it could be that you deploy something and for 10 seconds, every API request fails, and then it suddenly works. So try again, or get help would make sense. And then because in real life world, you don't want to throw a get help button to every user. If you have a big user base, this is more of a, not really a problem for us because we're building small products. But for example, in TicketSwap, we had 5 million users. And so it could get help button to, 5,000 people at the same time. that wouldn't be good for the support team. They wouldn't appreciate it from our side for sure.
Yeah.
And also users wouldn't really appreciate it because the support team would not be able to handle um, all these incoming live chat requests. So what makes sense is to have some kind of smart business logic on this, where after the third try, you saw a get help button, or depending on the status code, you saw a get help button. Because if you know that, okay, it's because of the deployment, in 5 seconds it's going to be fixed, let's just show a try again and add a timeout of 5 seconds to make it load a bit lower in terms of speed. You can find creative ways and a smart business logic to provide good next steps. But in our case, this is do the job because we don't have the large scale product problems, which is good. We keep things simple. So just try and get help to do the job.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Like even as we're speaking, I'm trying to think about not just edge cases, but like you say, like smart business logic that we can employ to like get the user to prompt the user to do something or give them some details. I'll have to think about that. Because I mean, with all of this, because I want to give appropriate feedback to the user, I'm just thinking about, depending on how I build the application, I want to build checkpoints and that sort of thing, and to give us observability into the system. So that's to say like, oh, we made it this far, or we didn't make it this far, or whatever, to give something helpful. So leveraging something similar, even for something like this, like, oh, there was an issue, like maybe you can try again. I'll have to put some thought into that.
Mm-hmm. Cool, nice. So from what I see, we don't have any other scenario. Yeah, it's really nice that in 1 hour we went from theory, introduction to actual design, and we have something tangible to show. Do you have anything else in mind for the session? Or because from what I remember, it was just about these states, right?
Yeah, this was understanding how to build a good async state or a waiting state. That was my primary concern. I had one tiny question. Well, the problem is I don't know if it's tiny. Like my tiny questions tend to explode, so I don't want to ask it. Okay.
No, go for it.
Okay. So it's actually on this page. The download links. We had done it before where I had buttons before, and you were like, oh no, we should make it like text like this, like PDF and spreadsheet. I was wondering, as a user, when do we look at text and say, I know that that text is clickable, but it's not styled to look like a button?
I always love your questions, man. Give me a sec to show you.
Sure. Because like I read through the Gestalt principles of design, and I was thinking like, similarity is interesting because it's like, that's actually why I added download : because I wanted to make it, I wanted to style the text to look different to appeal to similarity of like, oh no, clearly there's something, you have a context or you have something that you can appeal relativity to. And it's like, oh, PDF and spreadsheet are different from this text. So I tried to use that as a cue, but I'm not sure if it's only user testing will tell me if it's clear. But I thought maybe you might have something off the top of your head.
So your question can get even bigger and ask like, how can I understand what is clickable on the screen without trying to click everything? Which is a great question. I think it's one of the most, actually it's the most basic thing you should understand before you start doing any kind of interaction design. I think that's a really great topic to even do a session about and write articles as well. So I will show you my iPhone screen. You can see it, right?
Yep.
So on this screen, how can you understand what is clickable? Either for the text and
so
for the buttons as well.
Like it message, call, like that they all look like buttons.
So the one is the button shape, because button is something we're used to as a pattern. And for the text, what's the clue?
So contacts, at least, it has an arrow, like it implies direction or back or something. Edit is probably the least clear, because it's just text. But like you say, it's that
the navigation control.
Yeah, exactly. It's the idea of navigation.
Compared to the name of the contact and the edit, why edit you think is clickable? What's the common pattern with the buttons? What's the common element that it?
It's the backing, the rounded box makes everything look like a button.
I mean, if you look at the edit and the buttons with the box, what's the thing that they have in common, these two?
They look like they're the same color.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the way to solve one of the most basic ways to say what is clickable is the color. If you look also at the index screen, you see that the accents at the top are blue. The thing that you navigate in the list with the alphabet is blue, but the list items do not need to be blue because there is a common pattern in iOS, which is called table view, which is a list. And you always know that when I see a list, it's probably tabbable. And in contacts, in the list, everything is tabbable. So you don't really need to separate the ones that are not tabbable and the ones that are tabbable as well. So for the tabbable, or let's use another word for actionable items, colors, save. And when we say save, it's actually there is no shape that you will say it's a clickable. So for example, you say triangle, you say, no, it's not clickable, or you say rectangular and it's clickable. It's actually the UI, how can I describe it? The UI pattern. For example, in iOS, there is another thing, which is called tab bar. So if I use the Apple Music app, for example, on the top, on the bottom, I have the tab bar. It's a common pattern in iOS where I know that I have the navigation sections of this is the navigation bar of the app. These are the main sections of the app. So I know they're tappable. They're gray. They're not all blue or pink in the case of Apple Music, but I know that on this section, I can always tap on these elements. So it's the expected behavior. So the one is you use standard UI patterns that people are used to, like buttons, or that in the iOS ecosystem, you have the tab bar, you have the action bar, you have the navigation bar. That's why I'm such a big ambassador of using the native design, the native components that every ecosystem provides, because this is what people are used to. If you are a cool designer, you come up with your own kind of tab bar, cool, it's fine. But me as a user, is the first time that I see it, and I don't really care if you're creative enough. I just want something that is easy to use. Yeah. That's why Apple and Android, iOS and Android have design systems, because the goal is to make it consistent, because people are used to this.
Okay.
So yeah, standardized design patterns is the first answer, and the other one is the color. Color is especially for web. I mean, it's from back in the old days. You had the links, the URL that was blue, and that was the
blue and underlined was always another one.
Exactly. And this became the standard, right? And I'm not sure, maybe I'm wrong on this, but the blue doesn't have any kind of research or science behind it. It was just a random color they picked back then, and it just became the standard because everybody used it. And that's how a pattern becomes a standard pattern that everybody can use if many people use it, and if we all understand that, okay, this is what it does, and we can all reply to this question of what does this component do. Same thing goes for buttons. It's something we're used to also in the physical world, also with the switches for the lights and buttons for physical devices like radio or any other kind of device. And one thing to note here, which is very interesting, is, do you remember back in the first days of iOS, the skeuomorphic design, where you'd have visual patterns of real objects? So for example, the notes app, the header would be like leader, and then the paper would really have the paper texture where you could type text on.
I remember that, yeah. It was all yellow.
Yeah, it was super sexy era for the UI world, like so much creativity going on, like spending an insane amount of hours just to replicate the right shadow and simulate the lighting in the right way. But the whole concept, again, was simulate, like bring the offline world to the online. And that's how and that's why Apple was so successful and had such a great design, is because they thought, okay, people now are used to taking notes on a typical notepad. How does this notepad look? It's yellow paper with these lines, and maybe it has some leather or some kind of different header, let's say the top part. They picked a common, nice top part, and then they simulated the paper. Now, because people learned how to use the digital apps, after many years, they switched to flat design, and slowly they started getting rid of the skeuomorphic design. Because now, if you look at the Notes app, it's super simple. It still uses only the yellow color, which is the brand color of the app, and that's it. So as humans evolved, the more patterns became standardized, and the simpler UIs could become. You didn't have to simulate all the shadows and everything, because people knew that this is how it works, because they spent 10 years using devices. And that was the whole idea. But skeuomorphic design is slowly coming back just a little bit. Like in the new Mac OS, you see all these shadows and this cool stuff that they do. So they bring concepts of the physical world back to the UI design, because they went a bit to the other side, where they were like, okay, let's go for full flat design, which is not good. Shadows exist. And for example, and that's the last thing, because I'm getting too deep on this. Shadows in UI, many people think that, I should add shadows to make my UI more cool or something like that, or more fancy. But this is totally wrong. Shadow is an indication that this thing is on top of something else. So models, for example, can have shadows because it's a layer on top of the website. It's if you take, I don't know, like 2 books or like just 2 A4 papers, and you put them one on top of each other, you will see that the top one has a shadow. So that's the right way to use the shadow in the UI as well. Only for the part that are on top of something, that are not touching the ground, let's say, the surface.
That's so cool. I never. No, it's interesting. Like, because as soon as you said when we were speaking earlier, like, how would we do this in the real world? What would this look like offline? I'm just trying to think about, like, you take something for granted. If I look at a browser and you're like, okay, well, how is this browser? How is the design of what I'm seeing reflected in the real world? And it's so funny because I was struggling to come up with ideas. But even as you say it, like, well, what about modals or anything like that, dialogues? Like, it's all about perspective, and that this has a shadow, and this is shadowed by this foreground thing. And it's just like, obviously, like it's funny. I think it's one of those things that's so difficult to, not that it's ingrained in us, but it's so, I guess that's it. Like, it's so intuitive. Like, when you get really good design, you don't even notice that it's there. You don't notice, like, oh, they did something very cool. It just blends with our lives.
Exactly, because it's designed the way that they're used to, and you're used to the offline world.
Exactly.
And even with the colors, like when you get into the color theory, for example, why green is positive, and the answer, I think, is because it's in the forest, and that's where the humans grew and evolved as an animal, and green meant something like positive. But for example, why, if you add a lot of plants in your house, it feels better? Because that's where we come from. Like, we come from we live in the nature. It's just a thing of the modern human to get into blocks of concrete and spend their lives there. And that's always the thing. If you want to find what's the best way to do it, just look around you to the offline world. And there is a book, it's called Biomimicry or something like that. I don't remember the exact name, which is how you can innovate by observing nature, where they take it a level to the next level. And they have examples of how, I think in Japan, they built one of the fastest trains by observing how one of the fastest birds is designed by nature. And they just see, okay, what's the anatomy? What are the shapes? And all these kind of things. It's already optimized by Mother Nature. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's why a good designer is just a good observer. You really need to observe. And that's also the part of the user testing. You just need to observe how people think, and that's pretty much it. You just need to be as much human as possible. Another nice example of the iOS that I found some years ago is, have you seen the blur effect they use? For example, if you open the I don't
mission
remember
control,
how it's
whatever
called, the
it
mission control. The whole blur thing is that you now focus on something new. And in real world, if you really focus on something, you blur the things that are around. So they did the same thing. You now focus only on this, and we blur the rest. That's why it feels so natural in a way, instead of having a black layer on top of everything and showing something new. This won't happen in the real world. If I just look at the screen, I just blur the rest, the wall that is around the screen, and focus on one part. I don't really hide everything and just focus only on this rectangular.
And like what you mentioned before about not reprocessing every pixel. I'm only reprocessing the pixels that have changed. So it's like we're still within the context of where we were, but now we have this thing that's added or augmented.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I've been thinking about that a lot with the design of this app in general. Because what I'm noticing is everything I'm doing is centered around this center list. It's like there's a center list and there's maybe one or two other buttons and a title. And it's like every page is basically the same. It's really just, it's your focus ends up being in this core part of the screen.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a good one as well. Nice. So I think we can call it a session.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna close the live stream and then we can keep chatting as well. I think for the live stream, yeah, it's almost 2 hours, 1 hour and a half. It's pretty good. So yeah, thanks for everybody that watched the live stream. And probably we're gonna do another session with Matt. I don't know on what topic yet, but we're gonna publish something soon. So that's it. Bye. And